Get full episodes of The Damage Report as a podcast on iTunes and Android, and you can watch the live show every weekday on YouTube TV. With the midterms just a little bit over a week away, many people are crisscrossing the country attempting to mobilize, to do all these activist actions, get people out there and vote. And one of those who's doing perhaps more than anyone else actually is Fred Guttenberg, friend of the show. Welcome back. Parkland dad, obviously, and thank you so much for everything that you're doing around the country in advance of the election.
Thank you. How are you doing?
Well, with the news the past week, not so good necessarily, but we gotta stick in there. There's an election coming up.
I don't have words to describe how I've been feeling since that happened. Horrified. This was again preventable. And I see history repeating itself. And what I mean by that is in the immediate aftermath after Jamie was killed, our president, Senator Rubio, and others all started talking about everything but the gun. They talked about mental health. They talked about school safety. They talked about armed guards, but they never spoke about the gun. It's one of the reasons why I went after Rubio at the town hall a week later. This weekend, and I say this as a Jewish person, they're doing it again, and they're using my religion to try to pull it off. This was an anti-Semitic hate crime, make no doubt about it, and I'm horrified by what happened. But let's also not ignore the fact that this happened because somebody was able to walk into a temple with an AR-15.
Yeah. This
is also about the gun, and we must not let them pull the conversation away from that.
Yeah. He had pistols, but also an AR-15. Just a weird coincidence. They all seem to go for that, even though the right wing says it doesn't matter. You can do it with any gun. Hell, you could do it with a hammer or with a knife. But they all seem to want the AR-15. That is weird.
It's a destructive weapon.
Exactly.
Pretty destructive, yeah.
Now, I wanted to ask you one more question about that, though. We read a quote earlier in the show from an area rabbi calling on political leaders to saying that it starts with speech, stopping this sort of violence and asking for them to stop demonizing their opponents and speaking words of hatred and things like that. It seems like both from this attack and also from last week's attempted string of mail bombs, the political leadership, Donald Trump and all that, they don't seem to be moderating their speech at all. What do you think about that?
So let's first, you mentioned the political leadership. So the party in charge right now, we haven't actually heard from them for the most part. Have you heard from McConnell? Because I don't think I have.
No.
Have you heard from Ryan? Because he's sort of been in timeout for a while, but this would be a good time for him to come out of timeout. Because we haven't heard from him. So we haven't heard from the political leadership. We've heard from the president. And unfortunately, you can't walk away from the reality of what his speech, his comments do. And to make it worse, he continued to do it through the weekend. If you go back to the last week, the night he spoke about the bombings or the attempted bombings, he was mocking it.
Yeah.
This was an attempted domestic terror threat, and he was mocking it. On the day of the shooting, he was making a joke about a bad hair day, but then trying to do anything he could to try and turn this into something that it wasn't. I really, for the safety of our country, I'm going to say this as gently as I can. The man needs to be quiet.
I could sign on to that. So look, I want to talk to you about the midterms because obviously that could help to mitigate some of the damage they're able to do. And I know you're looking for an orange wave in this midterm. I saw some interesting data. I think it might have actually been you that spread this. 40% of voters under 30 say they will definitely vote this year. That's up 14 points from 2014, and Trump is not much loved by this group. What do you attribute this rise in enthusiasm, particularly amongst young voters, to?
Well, and number one, I did tweet some of that data out earlier. These kids want to be safe. They want to live in a world where they can be social, where they can go to school, where they can earn a living without fear of being killed. And this issue is one of the dominant issues right now that they will be voting on. They also, these kids, have a mentality that is different than the political leadership in place right now. They are civil, they are decent, and they are horrified by our elected legislative leaders who are not. And they're determined to be part of the change, and they will be. I think this is going to be the election where our polls are officially incorrect, because these kids are going to show up and vote. And if you talk to anybody under 30 years of age, they do not have landlines. They only work off of cell phones. So that means they're not getting polled for the most part. And they're going to be an enormous voting bloc, and they're not showing up in polls.
I know you're focused on a lot of different elections, but are there any across the country that stand out to you as especially important?
Well, I'll start here in Florida. We must elect Andrew Gillum. We cannot have a Trump puppet as our governor, a guy who's already said he would undo the gun safety legislation that we passed in this state. We must keep Senator Bill Nelson in the Senate, because to me, while it's pretty clear the House is going to flip, there's nobody who I want to fire from leadership more than Mitch McConnell. I think Mitch McConnell has done more to enable Donald Trump than anyone else. And if we can flip a few Senate seats, we can fire him from his leadership position. When I look at Florida, and other states may have similar things, Florida has what's known as the Department of Agriculture. And in this state, the Commissioner of Agriculture plays an enormous role in the background checks and the issuing of gun licenses. In the state of Florida, it is the office that the NRA has basically worked out and to negative effect. So that election here is critically important. We have a great candidate, Nikki Fried, who we need to elect, because the first day she'll kick the NRA out of that office.
Yeah.
But when you look around the country, I've been all over the place. I was just with Danny O'Connor in Ohio, Lucy McBath. You have Governor Cordray in Ohio. These are states that can really send strong messages by saying we've had enough of the way it was, and we're going to make a change.
Yeah. Well, Fred, I want to thank you for joining us on the show again. Keep up the great work. We've only got a little bit more than a week left.
Let's get this done. Thank you.
Let's do it. Okay, thank you.
Have a good day.
You too. Thank you very much for watching this clip from the Damage Report. If you liked it, don't forget to subscribe to this channel and ring the bell on YouTube to get notifications of our new videos. And of course, you can catch the full Damage Report live every weekday at 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific on TYT Network on YouTube TV.